I'd like to start today by introducing you to Brittany, a client of mine, a northern Minnesotan woman who's also a mother, a Native American, a student, a dietitian. And Brittany's first child was born the way about a quarter of all American children are born these days, which is by C-section. And there were many reasons for this, but the most prevalent, or the one that was given to her as the main reason for this kind of delivery, was that her pelvis wasn't big enough. And I want you to think about that for a moment. If you're becoming a mother for the first time, like she was told right away that really her body didn't work and wasn't made to do what she thought it had been meant to do. So I met Brittany 2 years after this, and she was pregnant again. And she was really wanting more from the experience this time, something different. And she sought out a midwife's care and a different setting for this second birth because despite what she had been told, she actually did believe that her body worked. And she thought that her best shot for a different experience would be with a midwife's care. There were, again, a lot of reasons for this. She had experienced a certain amount of discrimination in her small rural community because of her health history and how she'd felt the first time in the hospital. She didn't feel comfortable going back there. And it turns out that her intuition about seeking out something better for her was really supported by research. So I spent about 10 months, of course, getting to know Brittany over the whole course of her care. And this is where midwifery care really shines because we're building relationships with our clients. Brittany drove a considerable distance every time she needed to see me. And each appointment with a midwife is usually about 60 minutes. Only about 10 minutes are spent on medical tasks, and that's usually about all you get in a typical medical setting. But midwives really treasure that or other 45 or 50 minutes because over the 10 months of me getting to know her, I was not only learning her normal blood pressure, how much iron was in her blood, the size of her baby, whether or not she was at risk for something like gestational diabetes, but I was also learning what stresses her out, what she loves about her family, how she's sleeping, what comforts her, what foods are giving her heartburn. And so when Brittany's due date came around, we had a great relationship, one built on trust, one built on time spent, and one built that is really shown through research to improve the actual birth outcome. So a beautiful September day rolls around, and Brittany goes into labor. But there's a problem. And that problem is that I am already with Jen, another woman in labor. And I've already been there all night. She's clinging to me with every contraction. And as a home birth midwife, the one thing you don't do is you don't leave midstream. The shift does not end. And so I make a difficult decision, and I have to call a colleague in to go and be with Brittany for her labor. And this colleague drives from over 3 hours away. She knows how important this is. And I continue with Jen until her labor actually becomes too complex to stay where we are. We have to move on to the hospital. And so I'm crunched up asleep on a hospital couch in the early morning hours. Jen's still in process, having her baby. And my phone buzzes in my pocket. And there's no message, it's just a picture that my colleagues just sent me of Brittany holding her baby. And I realized something that hadn't come to me previously, and that's that, yes, I would have loved to be there, and she, of course, really wanted me there. But in the end, it's not about me in the slightest. Brittany did this. She owned it. She's carrying it forward. This was her choice to make, and she was able to see it through. And that's really what midwifery care is about at the core. It's about listening to women, helping them find their power and their choice, and most of the time, those choices leading to better outcomes for themselves and their babies. Women everywhere, regardless of their race, their religion, their family arrangement, their age, they always really remember how they're made to feel when they're giving birth. And because we are providers witnessing this and experiencing this with women at this sacred time, we need to treat it as such. So, how are midwives different? Well, a lot of people have stereotypes about midwives. Maybe a witch in the woods with some potions and some herbs. Or, more typically I get kind of, the hippie with the Birkenstocks and what do you bring to the birth? Maybe a crystal and a stick to bite on and a hot towel. And the Birkenstocks is true for some of us, but the rest is not accurate. Most credentialed midwives in Minnesota and really nationally and internationally share thousands of hours of clinical apprenticeship, advanced training, academic training, access to and use of very evidence-based care models, medications, therapies. But all that is really a lot less important than what we do that's so different from the medical model, and that's that we listen. We take a lot of time to listen. Midwives view pregnancy and birth as a normal part of life. When you're pregnant, you are not sick. You don't need to be managed unless you have another mitigating health concern. And the word midwife means with woman. We are not directing their care. We are with them as they are experiencing this part of their life. And so with unhurried conversations, frequent visits, always listening, helping them explore what their choices are, we can get better results for them, for their babies, for their postpartum time, for their nursing. Why does this matter? You might say, well, that's fine. A few people want to have their babies at home. They can be weirdos. Cool. You don't need to be a hero. And this isn't a push for everybody to have their baby out of the hospital, certainly not. But it is a push for choice and understanding what choices are, because despite all the bells and whistles, despite all of our technology in the United States around birth and pregnancy, right now the US is about 50th in maternal mortality. That's women dying in childbirth. Think about that for a minute. We have a lot at our disposal, and we're doing really poorly for our mothers. And countries that are doing a lot better than us are doing so primarily through the use of midwives for the lion's share of these women's care. In fact, even in the United States, as this graph shows, if you take two groups of similar women, so similarly healthy and low risk in midwifery care versus the standard medical care, the rates of a lot of interventions are a lot lower with midwives, primarily because they're taking that extra time. C-section specifically, about 3 or 4% of low-risk women delivering with midwives will experience C-section, which is a major surgery to recover from, on top of recovering from having a baby, which at least half of you know what that feels like. And the national average is about 20%, and it's a lot higher in rural areas. In our area specifically, it's about 33%, and in very rural hospitals, it's even higher. And less than 2% of women who have been using midwives say they'd want something different for the future. Women tend to really love their midwives once they bond with them, which is part of what makes our experience so enjoyable as well. I had one mom say to me that part of what makes midwifery care so special is that midwives understand the need to move and make noise and be scared and excited and sarcastic and quiet and serious and elated and focused and freaked out, all in one birth experience, and the grace and the knowledge to know that each of those has its rightful place, and that midwives have the ability to just be present through all of this and not just wait to catch a baby. A lot of moms tell us that they feel like the safety and security that comes from that relationship is what helps their labor to go as it does, a lot of times easier. And again, that is borne out by research. So midwives really try and be hands-off. We try and be there for support, to listen, to provide the care that's necessary when it's necessary. And women like Brittany really get it. But she shouldn't have had to drive 2 hours every time she had a prenatal appointment with me. There should have been a midwife in her own community that could serve her. We need more of us. Women in Minnesota and beyond really deserve to understand what midwives do and how that choice could be accessible to them. They deserve to be honored and respected for their bodies, for their families. And midwives really need to stick to using our most important tools, which is our ears, to really listen to mothers and the choices that they're wanting to make. Because while we might be the professionals in the whole experience, the women are the experts on their bodies and their babies and their whole experience. Thank you.